don't really trust this camera, but we'll see what happens. Part two, yeah, batteries went on the other camera. So, yeah, irritating. But anyway, I'm not going to combine the two files because they're two different cameras, and forget it. This doesn't matter. It's not that important. Doesn't really matter that much. Okay, so yes, so your taxes are paid in cash through Federal Reserve, doing the cashing out thing. And so the fact that the Fed does this in cash does make cash an official transaction commodity. I use that word for it. It's a unique synthetic device created, and the fact that it's associated with paying taxes and it's associated with you know things being monetized to it as a standard. Everything ends up monetized to it because it's the default standard. Is it circumstance and does make it mean something. It's not irrelevant. It's incredibly relevant. Okay, so yeah, now we're just getting into some of this investment banks, regular banking. So this is where me and Nick are, we're arguing about digits, but this is where the distinction in the digits matters. Is that these different, big banks like Citibank doesn't just have like one company. Citibank has a whole bunch of different subdivisions and elements to its business. So it's doing investment banking, it's doing regular banking, it's doing credit cards, it's doing car loans, it's doing all kinds of crap. And depending on which one of those institutions you're dealing with whether your assets are FDIC insured, and it certainly matters in the case of what kind of quality the digits being exchanged have in terms of what's the likelihood of this institution's liability in moving money around. Is the money it's moving around its money, or is the money it's moving around somebody else's money? And what kind of assets is that money in? So again, a bank can have a check written on its bank based on a security it holds from another bank. So it's assuming it has $1 million because it got something from another bank that's supposed to be worth $1 million. But when it goes to cash out for that $1 million, there's no $1 million, and so all of a sudden now it doesn't have the $1 million, and its check was no good either. So you have to understand that when digits are moving between these banks and people, it ends up being checks written on the existence of checks, written on the existence of checks, written on the existence of checks. So sometimes you can have a pretty distant relationship between the last check the Federal Reserve finally deals with and the first check written. And that distance can mean the difference between you're in business or you're out of business. You're solvent or you're insolvent. So that's what I mean by these digits aren't equal. Is that some of these checks are checks written on checks on checks written on checks, and some of these checks are checks written on a big giant vault of cash. Anyway, all right. So the whole the rich and the poor, they both have these liabilities. So I guess just a quick outline. What's the problem with the rich? Well, the rich spend a lot of money, which is labor. So they have a lot of stuff, cash and commodities and things they own, and they spend those into the economy to get people to do work for them, and that work involves lugging marble across the ocean and doing all kinds of stuff that you and I will never benefit from. It doesn't mean that we'll have more a cheaper automobile, or that our cable will be more durable, or our electrical service will be more durable. It has no relationship to that. And a lot of it's just service stuff, like let's have a $2 million birthday party, so let's just waste a bunch of resources and spill them on the ground, basically. Let's just get drunk and have a party and waste $1 million worth of stuff. Just burn it to the ground, so to speak. Burn it, period. And so that's one liability of the rich, is they're extremely expensive in terms of their personal indulgences, yachts and all this, personal jets and all this stuff that you don't get anything out. I mean, it doesn't do you any good whatsoever to have them flying over your head. And the poor have this opposite liability where they create babies, and the babies are very expensive, and they have to be taken care of, and they're stupid as fuck, and they drive into your car, and they just make a mess. Okay, so yeah, they're messy in another way. But if you took it by percentages, there's a lot more of these poor people, but these rich people they can kill, you know, so much more money. So they can burn in one day what a welfare whore burns in a year. And so the rich are much more dangerous in terms of just their waste. Now, what they cause in the economy is that they, you know, are looking for places to get richer. So they're looking for investments that have high payoffs, and you only get high payoffs the more you rip somebody off. So you have to have like some sort of weaselly little copyright thing, or some other weaselly little small print thing, and you know, some other kind of gimmick usually is what's required for you to make a big giant lottery kind of money. And they're always out there looking for a good lottery to play. They don't like little regular games, you know. They want the big, like everybody else, they're looking for the pick six. You know, so they'll invest in a ton of failures and idiotic notions and silly ideas. They're just a waste of time because they're looking for some big gimmicky payoff. And that's not sensible way to invest in civilization. Civilization should be a little smarter than that, you know, and know that, you know, certainly civilization could figure out that things like, you know, a civilization that has a rational investment scheme, yeah, could figure out something like, yes, you don't put solar panels on individual roofs. It's just idiotic. And you certainly don't put them on the road. Yeah, you don't drive on them. Anyway. So as the rich get richer, they may begin to bid up prices. Yeah, so that's the one to understand, is they, you know, that's sort of where we are now, right? The rich are so rich, they've bought everything. They own all the oil and the food and the this and the that, and all the prices are getting awful high. And you know, it becomes a problem. And then, you know, then they start heading for the commodities. And you know, this is the danger. The only good news is like with all these things, like when they talked about a housing bubble, in truth, housing has a certain limitation to how much it can bubble, just like food has a certain limitation to how much it can bubble. Because if you buy if you buy farms, let's say, because you know it's like something everybody needs, yeah, but the truth is the only way it's any good is if they can actually pay for it. But you sort of saw that in what's happening with food. Food is migrating to designer food. So even the food market is now going where the money is. They know that the money's where the rich are. The rich have the money to pay for stuff. And so even things like oranges or lemons have now become luxury foods. And so instead of trying to make a little bit of money on a lot of oranges or a little bit of money on a lot of lemons, they're trying to make a lot of money on very few lemons. That kind of thing. Those are two strategies you can have. So it's the average person has basically been priced out of the orange juice market, you know, by the fact that the you know, the orange producers have basically become like the oil producers. They've become an OPEC, you know, a cabal, and you know, they've agreed to extort higher prices. Anyway, and so they've gone with the low volume, high price mode rather than the high volume, low price mode of profitability. And that's where everything's going to migrate. Again, if the rich are the only people that have money, then everything's going to be designed for the rich. Just as if the only people who click on ads or are convinced to buy something because of an ad are the dumb poor slobs, then all the content in your civilization will end up being dumb poor content. So anyway, this is probably going further than I should in this video. But I was here, so I decided to do it. Alright, so let's just hit the FDIC insurance one more time. So FDIC insurance, again, the real problem is in the last 10 years they've increased the liability extensively. So let's say it was $2 trillion of assets being insured. It's now $7 trillion. and they didn't do anything to increase the fund that would be used to mitigate against an emergency. So they are guaranteeing cash to depositors, and yet they have no practical way of doing that. There's no diagram. The system was designed that they would have a fund of cash and use the fund cash to provide the deposit insurance. It wasn't that the government would just print the cash and give it to people. So they're in a position where it doesn't seem like they're going to have any way of fulfilling that guarantee, short of some mechanism of printing, or being very clever in how they distribute the money and obliging people to wait to get their cash. Something like that. So I guess there might be some point in going through a list of all the different investment modalities, you know, student loans and credit cards and bonds and stocks and the different kinds of stocks and all that kind of stuff, but that might be for some other time. So I think this is a good enough start, and you know, I'll do some more writing. But the point is some of this I guess has to be written as statements, and these are statements, and you either accept these premises or you don't accept these premises in terms of having a conversation about what's happening in the economy. If you don't think it's possible for the rich to get too rich, then I guess we're done talking. I mean, if you don't understand the danger of that and what that looks like every single time it's happened in history, yeah, then sorry. I don't have any help for you. I don't have any conversation for you anyway. And I guess the other point would be is that there's a point where, like I said, it gets so bad that this system can't be sustained, because just like with the vegetable argument, you know, the food argument, if you price the food out of affordability, then what the rich will do is say, I can't make enough money growing food, and so they're not going to give away the food for free. So what they're going to do is close down the business. So there's going to be a point where the rich can't make enough money off the people anymore. So, and they can't sell anything else to each other because they've already bought all the fancy clothes they can buy. And so there's going to be just nothing. And so they're just going to close everything down and say, I'm going to wait until the market shows up. But they're certainly not going to hire employees and lose money in the business. So they're not going to own a business that's losing money. And you can't make money if your prices are more than people can afford to pay. And obviously when you've rented so much stuff to people, when there's so much rent to pay, and the burden is so heavy, there's no way they have any disposable income, so there's just no way. So like I said, they're just going to start shutting things down. When they start to shut things down, that's when everything starts to snowball into catastrophe. So that's your Great Depression scenario. Pretty much. And I would argue that we're there. We've hit that wall. The rich are too rich, and if we don't do something to make them less rich in some sort of rational way, it's going to happen in a very irrational way. Pretty much. Yeah. But I don't know if that really has anything to do with this conversation about what makes the economy go. But we'll see. Anyway, let's see if this is of any use. And then I'll make another video when I have more stuff written down, I guess. I have a diagram, but you know, diagrams are just so troublesome. You know, where you just follow the money and the cash and the conversions, you know, and you know, stuff turns into surplus, turns into cash, turns into rent, turns into investment, comes back as profit. Profit goes back into investment because it becomes stuff. You do it, and you can just see the growth, the snowball. That's it. It's a snowball. It's a description of a snowball. Yeah, and yeah, it's a real problem. We've snowballed really big, and it's heading right for the front door. So, till next time.